As I mentioned to those who are already logged in, if you'd like to put in the chat where you're calling in from, please feel free to do so. Para los que entraron ahorita, si quiere poner en el chat de dónde vienen ustedes. Y otra vez, para los que están aquí que hablen español, si quiere escuchar el español, va a necesitar escoger interpretación en el parte de abajo que parece como un globo para escuchar el español, porque yo voy a hablar el inglés. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. For those who don't know me, my name is Selena Ponce. I run an organization called Hands United. We work with immigrant families with deaf and hard of hearing children. We also do a lot of immigration support, which is what we're going to be talking about today. So today in specific, we're going to be talking about visiting ICE facilities, what that looks like, kind of what that process is. Just as a disclaimer, I am not a lawyer. I will not be giving legal advice during this presentation. This is just general information. This workshop will not answer specific questions about your immigration case or the immigration case of others. If you do have questions regarding a specific immigration case, we can help connect you with an immigration lawyer or a accredited representative. As I mentioned, today we're going to kind of be going over what it looks like to go visit someone in an ICE facility, what kind of impact it has on families, especially those families of deaf and hard of hearing individuals, as well as what people as advocates, interpreters, educators, and community organizers can do in these types of situations. So just some general information about ICE detention centers as a whole. ICE detention is considered a civil detention. It is not considered a criminal detention, meaning that it goes through a different system of courts. These can be county jails. They can be private detention centers. They also can be federal facilities. They have a variety of different rules, communication access and visitation procedures. There are often communication barriers for immigrants and families. Specifically, I'm going to be talking about my experience from the Tacoma, Washington ICE Detention Center. As mentioned, ICE detention centers vary. So if you are going to be visiting an ICE detention center and you want more specifics about that detention center, I highly recommend reaching out to a community organization near you that has that kind of support. There are some commonalities between different detention centers, which is what I'm going to be talking about today, but there are also some unique things about each detention center. So here is a map of where all of the detention centers are located in the United States as of when this map was made, which I don't have the date right there. As you can see on the map, you've got your red, which are your privately operated facilities, your blue, which are your county or city facilities, and your white, which are unknown. You can also see, not surprisingly, there's a large number of detention centers towards the border, specifically in Texas and Florida. And again, like I mentioned, the detention center that I have the most experience with is the detention center in Tacoma, which is that red detention center all the way at the top of the map. In terms of preparing for a visit, you want to make sure that you've scheduled your visit either via phone or online, that you know when the person you're going to visit has visitation. That can vary depending on the type of location that they're in, as well as what kind of crime or what kind of detention they are under. You do need to bring identification. Generally, that can be a passport or a license. For the most part, they do take that documentation when you sign in. So you do want to make sure to grab that on your way out. That's definitely a mistake that I have made, of leaving my ID there and then having to drive back to get it. Generally, it is not recommended that those who are undocumented go to visit people in ICE. It can be a dangerous situation. People who are under the age of 18 do need to have accompaniment of an adult. It does not have to be their legal guardian, but it does need to be someone who is caring for them. There are restrictions around clothing, very similar to those who have gone to visit a jail or a prison. where you're not wanting to have things with a lot of pockets, not wanting to have anything that's super revealing. For women, you're not wanting to have like high heels, even though you aren't actually going to be entering the area where inmates are. They still have very strict rules around dress code. So just being aware of that. Also being aware of pockets in general. You can't really have things in pockets. You shouldn't really be putting your hands in pockets. That can look suspicious to individuals who are doing security. In terms of accessibility, you are able to request an ASL interpreter for going to visit deaf and hard of hearing visitors or deaf or hard of hearing detainees. You can also request a deaf interpreter if that's something that you need for communication. Generally, you will have communication delays. You will also have security difficulties as well as inconsistent policies. So what is written on paper is not necessarily what's actually going to happen. So just kind of being aware that it's definitely not an organized process, and it's definitely not a process where things happen quickly. So being prepared to spend a lot of time waiting, bringing a book or a crossword puzzle, something like that you can bring in. You cannot bring in phones generally, and generally they don't let you bring in other electronic devices. So having, a book or something that you can kind of spend some time doing. Having visited the Tacoma Detention Center, the only thing that they have available are like magazines from the 80s. So I guess if you wanted to learn about the 80s, you're more than welcome to read some of those magazines. But otherwise, I would definitely recommend bringing something with you to spend your time. In terms of advocates, you're going to want to bring consent forms, any sort of documentation that you have that your person you're visiting might need, as well as know your rights reminders for the people who are going to visit, as well as for the detained person. On the Immigration USCIS website, there is a packet that in theory they're supposed to give all detainees. It's available, I believe, in 3 or 4 different languages: English, Spanish, Russian, and possibly Vietnamese is the other one. However, when I have shown that packet to advocates and detainees, I have yet to find anyone who has actually received that packet. So again, there's resources that exist that may or may not have ever made their way to the people that they are supposed to have, but those are documents that you can bring with you. Generally, in most detention centers at this point, you can't bring in things to give detainees. So like books, activity things, those generally need to be sent in the mail, and they generally need to get permission from the detention center first. The process for that is that the inmate will fill out a form saying who is going to send what and exactly what it is, like even the name of the book, the name of the author, not just going to send a book, and then they will allow that to be sent. But depending on the detention center, you're going to want to look up what they will allow in and what they won't allow in. In terms of when you arrive, you are going to be going through a security screening. That can be a metal detector, that can be a pat down. There are lockers to put your devices in and your keys in, all of the things. Of course, you do have to pay money to get a key for those lockers generally. So having like some quarters with you is a good idea, as well as any things that they say that you're not allowed to bring in. For the most part, I usually left all of my stuff in my car, but you are also welcome to leave it in a locker there in the facility. You generally do have long wait times as well as last minute cancellations, which can be very frustrating when you've driven a long distance to get there, but it is something that can happen. Just because, visitation time is scheduled from 1 to 3 doesn't actually mean that you're going to start seeing people at 1. So being aware of that kind of flexibility of time and that you may not get things to happen when you hope that they will. And we're going to switch out ASL interpreters. When you enter the facility, it is a very high stress facility. There is limited accommodations for languages and disabilities, at least in my experience with Tacoma. The security guards did not speak other languages, so they struggled often to speak with those who were coming to visit because they could not communicate with the visitors. Also, you will often see detainees who are under a lot of stress, understandably. It can be very traumatizing. The other thing that I also often saw, so the Tacoma Center, when I went, had like a plexiglass window that you were sitting on one side and the other detainee was sitting on the other side. And so they would come and pick up the phone and you would talk to them, or if it was a deaf person, you would sign with them. The issue is often the wrong person will get called. So it has happened to me where individuals have come to the visiting area thinking that they have a visitor and no one is there. Often it can be individuals who unfortunately have not had the opportunity to have any visits because their family members are not legally able to come visit them. And that can be very traumatic. Those people are generally very upset because they arrived hoping that someone was there to see them and there was no one. So seeing people who are going through very difficult situations is very common. Also, as someone who speaks more than one language, on your side of the plexiglass, you're going to be hearing families talking about very difficult decisions. It is not a soundproof area by any stretch of the imagination. So you will be hearing bits and pieces of other people's conversations and the different stresses and different difficulties that they are going through. So just kind of being aware that there's going to be a lot of incidental trauma, a lot of trauma from hearing other individuals in their situations. Also, a lot of situations where you're going to see children being very distressed, crying, throwing fits, because obviously they want to be with their loved one and are unable to. So just being prepared for the types of things that you're likely to see and hear, as that are also not getting responses from the security, from the people who work there, either because they are desensitized to it or because they don't speak that language and so they don't actually know what's being said. So just kind of being aware that you as an individual who knows more than one language are likely to experience more trauma than someone who is monolingual. Like I mentioned, generally most visits are through plexiglass. They are no contact visits. There are also the option of video visitations through kiosks. I do not know of contact visits in ICE unless you're a lawyer or a religious person who's coming to visit an individual. So you generally will not have a contact visit. For those with deaf and hard of hearing family members, there can be difficulty of getting interpreters during visits. Of course, you're not going to be picking up the phone to talk to someone because they're deaf. You're going to be signing. If you're doing a video visit, that can also be an issue because depending on the quality of the internet or the quality of the connection on your end to their end, it can freeze. It can make it very difficult to communicate. Often deaf individuals are left with having to communicate through writing or through lip reading, which is not an effective way to communicate at all. So just being aware, as someone who goes to visit deaf and hard of hearing individuals, you are likely going to be seeing even more barriers to access than a general immigrant would be experiencing in detention. There are generally time limits that varies from location to location. But just because visiting hours is 2 hours, it does not mean that you're going to have 2 hours to visit with your loved one. It may be 15, 20 minutes. It kind of depends on how many people are there to visit. And honestly, the guards' feeling about it. Guards will be on their side of the glass monitoring the conversation. Something that occurs in the Tacoma location, I'm not sure if it occurs in other locations, is that there is a row of male detainees and then a concrete wall with a door in it, and then a row of female detainees. And if any of the female detainees at any point need to leave that space, all of the male detainees have to get up and walk out of the area so that the female detainee can walk by. And there is absolutely no warning on your end as the visitor that that's going to happen. you just all of a sudden will see the person you're talking to stand up and walk away, because you can't hear what the guard is saying. You can't hear what's happening on the other side. So being aware that people may get up and walk away, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not coming back. It usually means that there's some sort of security thing happening. Either somebody who's at a higher level security needs to walk by, or there's some sort of separation of genders happening, something to where there's something happening where that person needs to get up, but should be coming back to at least tell you whether their visit is done or not. There is a lot of emotional strain. You will not be having privacy. So you have your like plexiglass, and then there's like cinder block half walls, and then the next person's plexiglass. So you are not in like an enclosed space with someone. You will be overhearing a lot of people's communication. As a hearing individual talking to another hearing individual, it also can be difficult to hear, because there is so much noise happening in the space that you are in. A lot of times you'll be hearing things from detainees about lack of medical care, poor communication, harsh conditions, isolation, uncertainty about case outcomes, and just knowing that that's going to be something that you're going to hear and are going to have to process that in whatever way works for you, whether that's, getting more involved with the attorney or getting more involved with the process, or just being someone who can sit there and listen. Very much depends on your role and what makes the most sense for your situation. Specifically at this point, from having attended a lot of raid response meetings, I do know that there are a lot of illegal things happening in ICE detention centers where individuals are being treated in illegal ways. For example, there are some detention centers in Florida where inmates were being made to stand outside for lengthened periods of time during the summer. We're getting all sorts of heat exhaustion and things of that sort. It's also very common for inmates to have hunger strikes as a way of protesting what's occurring. That can also be something that's difficult for deaf individuals to understand what's going on if no one has expressed to them why people aren't eating and what is the reason. So you may get a lot of questions from a deaf detainee around just literally what is happening in the detention center, because again, their ability to communicate with others is very limited. And so just very basic questions around like, why are people not eating? Why is this person doing this? Can be very common when you're going to visit someone either who is deaf or someone who speaks a language that no one else in that space speaks. It is common, from my understanding, within detention centers to separate people who speak the same language, unfortunately. And so it can be common to have someone who is linguistically isolated, even if they are not deaf. Just that they don't have anyone else in their space that speaks their language. So again, a lot of miscommunication, a lot of confusion around what's happening, especially now with laws constantly changing. It can be very difficult to know what's happening day in and day out, as well as medical care generally is not occurring the way that it should be. In terms of deaf and hard of hearing and people with disabilities, I know there's currently a legislator who is writing a letter of complaint to the head of ICE regarding doing things that are illegal in terms of the rights of those with disabilities. So there are people that are working to enforce the laws. Unfortunately, those people are not usually those that work in the ICE detention center. After the visit, definitely spending time to process what you've just gone through. Like I mentioned, it is a traumatic experience. Making sure that families, if you are an advocate, making sure that families know how to make next steps, know what they should be doing next, that families are documenting any concerns around medical neglect, around disability access issues, around abuse. Those sorts of things can be very useful for the lawyer to know, especially if you are dealing with an inmate who may not have literacy in native language. They may not be capable of writing down their own complaint. And so having someone who is able to document that, documenting meaning day, time, and what occurred. making sure that you are able to connect the detained individual with legal and community support if you are an advocate, specifically for deaf and hard of hearing detainees, making sure that people have the ability to file requests for ADA accommodations, that you're also tracking communication barriers and connecting with advocacy groups. There have been individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing who have been released from ICE detention due to the lack of access to interpreters and due to language deprivation occurring. So the more that you can document that, the more that lawyers and other individuals can use that information with the intention of getting people released from detention. Some recommendations, just make sure that you're trauma informed and culturally responsive. So if you are going to visit someone who perhaps does not have your same culture or does not speak your same language, being aware of what sort of needs they may have. So some classic examples I can think of, if I was going to visit somebody who is Muslim, making sure that I'm thinking about, okay, is the facility making sure that they have access to food that is not pork? Is the facility making sure that they have space for daily prayer? Is the facility respecting their right to celebrate Ramadan and other things, even though that's not my culture, that's not where I come from? But being aware of those things and being aware that those may be things that a detainee might bring up. Also, making sure as an advocate that you're aware of what barriers there may be before sending families to visit. So like I mentioned, often the security guards and individuals at ICE don't speak other languages. So if you have a family that's going that does not speak proficient English, making sure that you have someone who's accompanying them who does speak enough English to get them through the security system, because you don't want someone having an issue with security because they didn't understand the directions. Also knowing how to escalate ADA and language access violations, as well as encouraging families to debrief after each visit. What was their experience? What are they going through? Because like I mentioned, it is a very traumatic experience. It is really, really hard to process. I'm going to go over some resources that our organization has. So like I mentioned, our organization majority works with deaf and hard of hearing individuals. So we do have support for immigrant families with deaf and hard of hearing children, as well as deaf and hard of hearing immigrant adults. We provide consultations to lawyers and accredited representatives in terms of connection with with interpreters of other sign languages. For those who don't know, every country has its own sign language. So if someone comes from Ecuador and someone else comes from Peru, they are going to be signing a different sign language. And that is often something that's not thought through. Making sure that lawyers have connection with expert witnesses, country conditions witnesses, as well as evaluators who are familiar with deaf and hard of hearing individuals. That can be really helpful in terms of like psychological analysis, because the way that you analyze someone who's deaf is not the same as the way you analyze someone who's hearing. We do also have Know Your Rights presentations that are available in multiple spoken languages as well as signed languages. At this point, we have ASL, Mexican Sign Language, Ecuadorian Sign Language, and Dominican Republic Sign Language. I believe in the next week or so, we're going to be doing Colombian Sign Language, and I'm hoping in January to do Venezuelan Sign Language. We do also have a Know Your Rights card that's available in about 15 different languages, sign languages, and that's available on both our English and Spanish website. We do also offer basic English and ASL classes for newly arrived deaf adults. That is taught virtually by one of our deaf interpreters, and it is free. We do also offer citizenship classes to deaf and hard of hearing individuals who are starting to practice for their citizenship test. We also write letters of support specific to the deaf community within each country. So that can be statistics around how many interpreters are available in that country. What does the education system look like? What does the employment system look like? What kind of hardships would a deaf individual face that is different than what a hearing individual would face? We do also write individual letters of support specific to each family. So specifically, this family has been involved with our organization for X amount of time, and we've seen them do these things to be able to show that they have a connection to the community. And we also have referrals to immigration lawyers as well as accredited representatives. And we're going to switch out our ASL interpreters. I did want to quickly go over what an accredited representative is. It is an amazing program that not many people know about. So these are non-attorneys who are authorized by the DOJ, the Department of Justice, to provide immigration legal services. You have to work with a DOJ-recognized nonprofit organization, which there are many throughout the United States. You are able to give legal advice and help individuals to complete immigration forms. Depending on whether you are a partially accredited or fully accredited representative, you can represent clients before USCIS. The reason that entire process and system works, or excuse me, was created, is to expand legal access to underserved immigrant communities. So that is the reason that entire process was started. It is something that you can get training in. It is something that I have had training in and am in the process of having our organization be DOJ recognized and accredited. The reason to think about becoming an accredited representative, it does help close the language gap. It does provide people with more affordable and accessible legal support. It does provide a legal pathway to assist with immigration causes safely and ethically. It also empowers community members to serve in more culturally responsive ways. So especially if you are an individual who speaks a low resource language or sign language, meaning a language that not many other people speak, becoming an accredited representative is a way that you can help support your community. It does also allow nonprofits to provide in-house immigration services and can be very impactful for those who have communication barriers, specifically with deaf and hard of hearing individuals. As far as I am aware, there is only one accredited representative in the United States who signs, myself hopefully being the second. And I am unaware, I know of one deaf immigration lawyer, but they are lowercase deaf, meaning they do not sign. And I do not know of any deaf immigration lawyers or sign language fluent immigration lawyers. So having those services available is very important. Specifically, when I started taking classes about a year ago, I did some research on what is available to the deaf community in terms of immigration that I could find. There was one Know Your Rights presentation that was on YouTube that had an interpreter about this big on the screen and then had the main lawyer speaking English. Outside of that, I could not find resources. We could not find a Know Your Rights card that was in sign languages. A lot of different resources that we have created were created because we could not find those resources that were available for the deaf community. In terms of the how, there are community organizations that have trainings. The three that I'm mentioning here are all available online. Villanova University's VISTA program is the one that I took. That's a 3-part series. Each of those parts, I believe, is 2.5, possibly 3 months. And depending on kind of what level of accreditation you're wanting, depends on how many you would take. Clinic's COIL program is similar. They only go up to a partially accredited representative, not a fully accredited representative. And Innovation Law Lab Calibri program, which is based in Portland, Oregon, also partners with Villanova Vista's program. You can also, instead of or as a precursor to becoming an accredited representative, you can volunteer with a local nonprofit that does have DOJ recognition. There is a list of those nonprofits available on the DOJ website, as well as on these slides that I'll be sending out after this presentation. You also can attend virtual community organizer trainings just to kind of get an idea of like what's happening. How could I be involved either as being an accredited representative or as being a community organizer? National Immigration Project has community organizer meetings at least once a month, as does the Immigration Defense Project They each talk about different topics. They generally are free and are virtual. And I do know all three of those organizations are open to getting accommodations, both in terms of spoken language as well as in terms of sign language. Some information, if you are going to visit an ICE facility and you would be willing to share information, we do have communication boards that we've created that are available on our website. We are in the process of fundraising to be able to get those printed and laminated and sent to the about 150 ICE detention centers. If you would be willing to print and take one with you to whatever facility you to go to visit, those are available on our website. We are also in the process of ensuring that all ICE facilities have video phones. For those who don't know, a video phone is a phone that deaf individuals can use to make phone calls through an interpreter. It is something that is free for deaf individuals and covered under the FCC. So we are in the process of contacting ICE facilities to see whether they have those. If you are going to an ICE detention center and feel comfortable asking, do you have a video phone? And then can let us know whether they do or whether they don't. That's helpful information for us to then be able to get them connected with a video phone should they not have one. We are also in the process of developing Know Your Rights presentations in more languages. Currently, as I mentioned, we've done 4 sign languages and Spanish. We are in the process of developing those in other spoken languages as well. If you are interested in donating towards that process, please feel free to do so. Our slides in terms of translation is about $80, and our voice interpretation that we would need is about $65. So be thinking if there's a community that you work with or a community that you know is in need, we are definitely open to helping support those communities. We are also in the process of collaborating with a deaf counseling group to create an immigration support group for deaf and hard of hearing individuals who've been affected by ICE, meaning either those who themselves have been detained or who have loved ones who have been detained or loved ones who've been deported. We are still collecting information from community members about whether that's a need that people are seeing. At this point, I've gotten 3 or 4 responses, so we're kind of waiting to see if there's a need for us to then create something. So if you are someone who works with the deaf and hard of hearing community and you are aware of that need, please feel free to fill out our survey so that we know about that need, and we can also share that information with you once we get those set up. I'm going to go ahead and pause here and take a moment for questions. I know that was a lot of information all at once. If you would like to put your question in the chat, if you would rather turn on your video and sign or unmute yourself and speak, you are welcome to communicate in whatever modality works best for you. And I'm going to take a hot second for people to put in questions if they have them. Okay, looks like we are questionless at the moment. So I'll keep going to the next thing, and then we can always come back to questions. I believe there's one more slide. Oh, hold on. Octavio has a question.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for this presentation. I'm really enjoying learning so much about all these different detention centers and how to visit them. But I'm curious, do you know for ICE that they're still not providing access for deaf over video phones? I'm curious if you plan on collaborating and connecting with ICE to make sure they're providing video phones. Will you be doing that or not?
So we have a list of all the contact information for ICE detention centers, and we've been trying to make phone calls to ask that question. We have not been successful with people actually responding. At this point, we are talking to immigration lawyers about filing a request, not a Freedom of Information Act, because that's a little different. There's something called a someone just told me. I think it's called a circle, CRCL, something like that, where you can make a request about has something happened or not happened within an ICE detention center. So we are in the process of partnering with immigration lawyers to fill out that paperwork to make that request. We do have contacts within Purple to be able to get people set up with video phones. We just need to find out which facilities have them and which ones don't. And that's where we've run into the barrier of people within the ICE system not giving us that information.
Okay. The reason why I'm asking is that I've been wondering if there's a need to focus on the deaf community specifically related to immigration. I think you said in New York, it's really important that we need to get that set up because I know rural areas, a lot of times there's such a lack of access. And so it's so important to make sure that language access can be accomplished. So that's why I was wondering.
It's definitely on our list and something that we're wanting to get more information about. My hope is that we can connect with enough community organizations that already have people that go to each detention center to where they can kind of do that investigation for us. Because at this point, making phone calls or sending emails has not been successful in getting us that information. So I'm trying to figure out how can we do a workaround to get that information.
Okay, sure. And then also the second thing is about the seven years or less in the system with ICE. I've not been able to find anything out about that. So how do I find out about that for kids? Could you expand on that, please? Yes. If they're 7 years old or younger.
17.
Oh, 17. Thank you. For minors, if they have family who are put into detention centers and they don't have contact through the ICE system. So how do we figure out how they can be represented? And the reason why I ask is that, kids are just disappearing in the system. Nobody knows where they are.
So, in theory, those individuals might be applicable for specific juvenile support. That would definitely be an immigration lawyer question as to whether they would be eligible for that. I believe it's SIJS. That would depend on their specific situation. From what I understand, there is an organization, Acacia, I believe is their name, ACACIA, that specifically does representation of youth and youth with disabilities. I'm actually meeting with them, I believe it's on Thursday, to get more information about what kind of support they have for the deaf community and what kind of support they need around the deaf community. And they are a national organization.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that.
Laimari, did you have a question?
Yes, I'll sign. Do you know just an estimate of how many deaf people are in ICE detention facilities this
So
year?
at this point, we have done consultations with 6 immigration lawyers who have represented 8 deaf individuals who have been detained. I know currently of 1 deaf individual that is currently detained. However, those are just the people that have found their way to us. So how many there are that have not? I did recently attend the Southeast RID conference, and there was an interpreter there who mentioned that he is getting pretty consistently called over to ICE specifically for interpretation, that month, which was this past month, November, that he had been called over to ICE detention centers on 4 different occasions for 4 different individuals. Again, confidentiality, he couldn't share more information about that. But what we have been doing a lot of is attending a lot of immigration meetings of raid response meetings, local and national organizations, and just making sure that that lawyers and accredited representatives know about our services so that they can get that support. Because what we're generally seeing is, which is understandable, that immigration lawyers don't know what they're doing with death, and they therefore don't know how to defend them. So we've been really lucky in that we've gotten connected with people, and we've been able to get them connected with, Ecuadorian sign language interpreters or Mongolian sign language interpreters or whatever that language is. The other thing that we're in the process of developing that I'm hoping will be happening in the new year, we're looking at partnering with two national organizations to do either bi-monthly, every 2 months, or every 3 months online consultations specifically for deaf and hard of hearing individuals with immigration lawyers. And we have two organizations who have said that they would be willing to provide the immigration lawyers if we were willing to provide the interpreters. So that is on our list of things, with the hopes that that would then get us more connected with deaf immigrants who may end up in ICE at some point, and we then would have that information and be able to support them. Unfortunately, at this point, we have reached out to NAD and other bigger organizations, and they don't really seem to have the resources or bandwidth to work with this community. So I have yet to find any deaf organizations that are doing the equivalent amount of work with deaf immigrants as we are, which is both sad and frustrating because although we are national, we do not have any federal funding. We do not have any grants. We do not have the same sort of clout that an NAD has, that an RID has, that other bigger organizations have. And although I have reached out to them and I have tried to talk to them about the issue, it doesn't really seem like they have the bandwidth or the know-how to get involved with those sorts of things, which is really unfortunate. In terms of numbers, I do know that in terms of deaf children, that 33% of deaf children live in households that do not speak English as their first language. 25% of deaf children live in households that speak Spanish. That's from the US Census. Again, US Census is very likely to undercount undocumented individuals. So the exact number of deaf immigrants, I don't think is a number that is going to be easy to get. But I do know that we're getting more and more contacts, which is good in the sense that people are finding us, but then it also always leaves me wondering, but where are the rest? And how do we find them? How do we make sure that they have their needs met? So we're definitely on a campaign of just informing as many people as possible and trying to make sure that our name is out there.
Yes, thank you so much. And I'm taking this presentation because I'm really motivated because of my family. They're from the Dominican Republic, and my mom is actually deaf herself, and she moved to Puerto Rico, and her family moved to the US and then on to Canada. So I really feel strongly connected to this topic. And also recently, I've started, I work at VRS, and there have been many calls related to immigration, related to ICE. So just a great job to your organization. It's really neat, and I so appreciate your support and your efforts. And I plan to contact you later to discuss that more. So thank you.
I am currently in talks with Purple about doing a Know Your Rights presentation in collaboration with them. I'm hoping that they will go through with that. I've put the information out there and made the offer, and at this point, that's kind of the extent of what I can do. But I'm hoping to just kind of
Thank you
keep
for that.
dropping those breadcrumbs and seeing if they lead anywhere. I know you are trilingual, so if you are interested in helping support with any of the stuff that we're doing, please feel free to reach out. I don't know, obviously, your background in terms of certification, but we do offer volunteer hours that can count towards CEU numbers for certification.
Great, thank you. Thank you for letting me know. I am trying to get in contact with Purple too, and I'm going to email them as well.
Please do. Okay, there was a question in the chat. If we come across someone in our community who is in ICE detention, what is the best way to put deaf community members or their families in touch with you? So let me put my contact information. And I'm going to have to grab my VP number because I sure do not have that memorized. But I do have a video phone. I am obviously hearing. I can speak both English and Spanish. I have connections with deaf individuals and hearing individuals who sign in, I don't know, at least 15 different languages. So if they are families who need support in other sign languages that are not ASL, we do have the ability to help support with that. Not a problem. Danny, is there one more slide or am I just making that up? Oh, there is. Beautiful. Okay. So here's my pitch. If you would like to donate, please feel free to do so. It is tax deductible. We do also have a Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. We have a Facebook and Instagram in both English and Spanish. Our YouTube at this point is a mix of languages, but I did just figure out about channels on YouTube. So we're in the process of separating those out into different languages so that you can land on the page of the language that you want. We do have a cajillion volunteer opportunities. So if you are interested or passionate about this topic or the deaf community in general, the immigrant community in general, please feel free to reach out. We are always looking for more support. Regardless of your sign language skill, your spoken language skill, we can find a way for you to help. We do also do these sorts of presentations and Know Your Rights presentations and general immigrant best practice presentations for organizations and schools. So if you have an organization or a school who could benefit from that kind of presentation, please feel free to reach out. We do also do Know Your Rights presentations at a lower language level for deaf youth and for deaf individuals with language deprivation. So if that is the community that you work with, we do have the ability to support them. We do also on our website have 4 social stories that we've written about ICE situations. What to do if ICE comes to your house, what to do if ICE comes to your school, what to do if ICE comes up to you on the street, and what to do if ICE has a loved one. Excuse me. And those are currently available in English, Spanish, and we're in the process of translating them into sign languages. So if you have individuals who could use that kind of support, who may not have the language skill to understand a full level Know Your Rights presentation, we do have those available on our website. I believe that's the last slide. Not a problem. So I will be posting this recording on YouTube publicly. I will also be sending out the slides. If you did not register through Zephy, I do not have your contact information. So please be sure to put down your contact information in the chat or email me or text me if you would like any of the resources that we went over today but have not registered through Zephy, because that's the only way that I know who is here and that I'm able to reach out. Again, if you find yourself in a situation where you need support with the deaf community or with immigrants who have deaf children, please reach out. We are in the process of developing American Sign Language dictionaries in, I believe, 16 different languages, 19 different languages, something like that. So if you randomly find yourself thinking, man, I really wish that I had an ASL dictionary that was in Hmong, hit us up. If you're like, hey, I really wish I had an ASL dictionary that was in Mom, hit us up. We are very much developing what it is that people are asking for. And so if you have a need, we are attempting to fill it as best we can, but we can only fill the needs that we know about. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening. Again, feel free to reach out if you have any questions, concerns, etc. Thank you to you, Joan.